My name is Esther Brown, and I am the Complaints and Enforcement Officer for the Regulated Industries Complaints Office. This morning, I'd like to provide you with a little bit of information, brief information about what it is that RICO does. I'd also like to provide for you some information about how you, as a board member, will be interacting with RICO in your capacity as a board member. Okay, so first and foremost, RICO is a statewide agency. So we are a division of the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, and we have offices throughout the state. Our largest office is here on Oahu. We also have 2 offices on the Big Island. We have an office in Maui, and we also have an office in Kauai. RICO is the enforcement entity for the professional and vocational licensing laws. So we work really closely with PVL, and we'll be working really closely with you when it comes to matters affecting licensees. RICO is organized into 3 major sections: the Consumer Resource Center, our Field Investigations Unit, and our Legal Section. Okay, and let me tell you a little bit about each of the sections. The Consumer Resource Center is our front line. We are a complaint-driven entity, meaning we act on complaints of misconduct by, in your situation, your licensee. So we are complaint-driven. Consumer Resource Center is our front line. Using a criminal analogy, the Consumer Resource Center is like the police. They get the 911 calls. Something is happening, can you look into us, okay? So they intake inquiries, they answer questions from the public, from licensees, from respondents, officials, etc. They receive and refer complaints for further investigation. And anyone can file a complaint with our office. You can file a complaint, a member of the public can file a complaint. We get complaints from businesses, from competitors, hospitals, employers, etc. So anyone can file a complaint with our office. The Consumer Resource Center is primarily charged with reviewing the complaint to see whether or not there's something that we can do with that complaint under the licensing laws. So they are the front line for RICO. Our second unit is our Field Investigations Unit, and they're the meats and potatoes of RICO. They are comprised of experienced personnel who investigate complaints to determine whether there is a possible licensing law violation. So these are our investigators. They are the ones that go out into the field. They would talk to the licensee. They would communicate with the person who is complaining. They would determine what sort of information or evidence that we would need in order to make an evaluation of whether or not there's a likely licensing law violation. We have several, I just love my field investigative staff. They are just awesome. We have several members who have a lengthy history of law enforcement investigation, and many of them have a long history in regulatory investigation, so they know how to do their work. The final unit in RICO is the legal unit, and this is the one that most of you will be interacting with in your capacity as board members. The legal section is comprised of attorneys, and they actually prosecute complaints that involve potential licensing law violations. Just to give you an idea of sort of the work that comes through RICO every single year, for fiscal year 2018, we had approximately 2,800 complaints that were processed. 2,800. So if we were to divide that number by the amount of full-time investigators in our office, as well as the amount of full-time attorneys that we have, that would average about 190 complaints investigated per full-time investigator, and 358 complaints handled per attorney. The work that we have at RICO, and the biggest challenge that we have at RICO, is the workload issue. If any of you were to come down to my office, you will see in the offices stacks, piles of cases and evidence and information that is gathered. That is the environment in which we operate. It can be daunting at times, but nevertheless, RICO has a great staff. They're very committed. They work long hours, and they try their best to get to all of the complaints that have been filed. And the 2,800 complaints that we received and processed in fiscal year 2018 doesn't account for the pre-existing complaints that were already in inventory. So the work is daunting, but we have a great staff, and they are very committed, and they know what they do. In enforcing the licensing laws, we have several tools. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that with you as well. The enforcement tools are, we regulate unlicensed activity, number one. We have a pretty good education campaign in order to reach the public. And we also, the final part of it, which is what the meats and potatoes of what we do as an office, is complaints processing and prosecution. So let me talk about the regulation of unlicensed activity. This is probably one of our most effective enforcement tools because all of you sitting here went through the process. You got educated, you paid to go through some program. You got the training and expertise needed to do what it is that you do on a daily basis. You got your certificate or your permit or your license, and you're out there practicing with members of the public. Unlicensed people have done none of those things, and they're out there and they're taking your work and they're exposing the public to risk. So we enforce the licensing laws by enforcing against unlicensed persons. You won't see cases or complaints involving unlicensed persons because as a member of the board or commission, you do not have jurisdiction over them. Those matters are handled through the circuit court process. Those matters will often result in monetary fines or injunctive relief, which basically means they get fined for engaging in activity that requires a license, and number two, they are prohibited by the court from continuing to do so. And I will be quite honest with you that there are some challenges in regulating unlicensed activity. One of the main challenges is that there's just a high recidivism rate among individuals. There are just people out there in every single community that fly under the radar and choose to do illegal conduct, and they are repeat people. So they're just out there. The other challenge is that there are homeowners or people that are willing to engage unlicensed people because the costs are costs, et cetera. They can do it quickly, on and on and on. So there are people in the community, a lot of them, that freely use unlicensed persons to do the work. The other challenge that we face is that this is Hawaii, people. We are an Ohana community. You guys probably know somebody that knows me, and I probably know somebody that knows you. We live in a community where we care about one another, and as a result of that, we just don't want to get involved. We don't want to rat out people. You know, we don't want to do X, Y, and Z. So because unlicensed activity matters are prosecuted in our courts, we have to meet an evidentiary burden. And a lot of times, we have people that are willing to report it. Hey, so-and-so is down the street, you know, and they're working on this house and they don't have a license. Go check them out. So our investigators go and check them out. But when it comes to, hey, we need more information, what did you see? Because by the time we arrived on the scene, they were gone. So what did you see? Why do you think they were unlicensed, et cetera? It's very difficult to get evidence. And if a homeowner is willingly using an unlicensed person, they're not going to cooperate. So those are some of the challenges with going after unlicensed activity. Nevertheless, RICO has this awesome unlicensed task force so that whenever someone calls us or stops by or tells us that they think there is unlicensed activity going on, the task force is on it. They're out there as soon as possible. And again, much of the time, the activity is ceased by the time members of the task force arrive on scene. But they have been very successful in other areas. Contracting is very, very difficult, but in other areas, they have been very successful in getting out into the community and catching people in the act and issuing citations. So the main way that we regulate the professions for you to ensure that the proper people are doing the work that you have invested in is through the regulation of unlicensed activity. The second enforcement tool that we have is education. RICO, as you know, and the professional and vocational licensing boards consist of 51 broad licensing areas. Okay, that's over 4,000 statutes and rules that we are responsible for enforcing. And I will admit, there are some that I haven't even looked at in my 15 years with RICO, honestly. There are. But nevertheless, it is a daunting task. And so we believe at RICO that knowledge and education is an is a critical tool for enforcing in the area, and so we do expend our resources in the area of education. First and foremost is the Consumer Resource Center. Again, our frontline. People that work in that section are incredible. They just have a way of dealing with the public. They are just so good at listening, sometimes for hours, to people just complain and complain and complain, and they try to narrow the issue down to whether or not there is a RICO issue. Yes, yes, yes. Some of our employees in the Consumer Resource Center have actually made friends with a lot of vocal complainants, and that is a testament to the skills that they have. They are very, very good. They spend hours on the phone. They're excellent at handling people that come in, walk-ins and so forth. And just for some numbers, for fiscal year 2018, the Consumer Resource Center, as well as our neighbor island employees at the offices, received over 10,000 phone calls, just general inquiries. May or may not have dealt with RICO matters, but they handle each one so well. And if it's not a RICO matter, they will refer it to an appropriate agency or some other organization that could possibly help the person. It's very customer oriented. During those phone calls, if it is a RICO matter, they will spend the time to talk to the complainant about RICO and educate. So therein is our frontline education, the Consumer Resource Center, and the people on the front line in our neighbor island offices. We also have a website. So on the DCCA website, there is a RICO website, and there is a ton of information there as well. Over the years, RICO has compiled brochures, frequently asked questions, et cetera, about all the major industries that are regulated. And so they're there, they're downloadable. You can read it, you can print it out, you can pass it out at meetings or whatever. But we do have all of that available through our website. The other thing that RICO does in order to educate sort of the public and licensees, et cetera, is that we interact directly with public at community events, at community fairs, and so forth. So in fiscal year 2018, RICO attended events where there were more than 60,000 people there. We normally have a booth. We have employees that are there from CRC or investigations if people have more questions about our investigative process. And of course, we have our brochures. Just recently, we attended the Kauai Elderly Fair. It was held several weeks ago, and it was such a success. The RICO employee that attended the event said that there were just so many seniors who had never heard of RICO, number one, which is, we have to work on that. So they had never heard of RICO, but when they talked to the people at RICO and the other representatives from DCCA, they were very impressed. They walked away with information in hand and feeling empowered. They were like, wow, this is really, really good. And their family members agreed too. So it was such a success. And those are the things that we want to do. We want to get out there. We want to get into the communities. We want to let people know who we are. And that's the way we do so. And also in my role as the Complaints and Enforcement Officer, when I hear of a case where, unfortunately a consumer has been scammed or has lost a lot of money, did all the right things, but relied on the wrong person, I often will make a personal call to that complainant and say, hey, is there anything that our office could have done to perhaps help to prevent that? Be it come and talk to you, talk to your friends, come to your church organization, or what have you. So we are here and we are willing to do that. And in fact, if any of you in your industries have an annual meeting or what have you, and you would like someone from RICO to come and talk to you about what it is that RICO does, we would be more than willing to do so. So please remember that and send me an email or call my office. We'd be more than happy to set up something. The other enforcement tool that we have is complaints processing and prosecutions. They go hand in hand. And as members of a board or commission, this is how you will be interacting with RICO the most. Okay. As I said, in fiscal year 2018, we processed 2864 complaints. That means after the complaints came in, the 911 calls to CRC came in, they were screened, and there was enough indicia of a potential licensing violation in 2864 complaints, basically. What CRC does in that particular scenario is they will refer those complaints to our field investigation section, and the field investigators will get it and do the investigative work, do the the heavy lifting. So with the criminal analogy, the field investigators are like the detectives, okay? So they'll go out there and see whether or not there's a licensing law violation. Some of these cases may result in prosecutions, but most of them aren't. And that doesn't mean that RICO's not doing their job. You know, what that really means is that the majority of people in your profession are good, and they're doing a good job. And they really, you know, you guys have great people. So it's really a minority that we're dealing with, and that you guys will get to know my office is the minority of people who do run afoul of the law, and who my office will look at and consider prosecuting if we have the goods, so to speak. Okay. Some of the challenges, of course, with complaint processing and prosecutions, again, it's the numbers. It's the whole workload issue that is representative of any state agency. Prosecutions are the actual enforcement. So when the complaints come in through the Consumer Resource Center, they are investigated by the detectives in the field investigation section. At that point in time, if the investigator feels like, you know what, there's enough here of a potential licensing law violation, we're going to refer it to the legal section. Legal section, the lawyers will take it, they will look at it, they will scrutinize it, because RICO has a burden of proof in these cases. RICO has to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that there was a likely probable licensing law violation. That means looking at all of the evidence, documentary evidence, testimonial evidence, credibility of both parties, including the person that filed the complaint. So that is what the lawyer does. The lawyer analyzes all of that. And if they feel that there's a potential licensing law violation, then they will visit you in the form of a settlement agreement proposing disciplinary action, and that will be presented to you to make a determination on. The other way is to go through a contested case proceeding, which is an administrative trial, and the result of that will be the hearings officer's recommended order, which you will receive, and you will be able to act upon in your role as members of the board. The challenge for the prosecutorial process, again, it is always the numbers. And what I mean by that is a contested case hearing can take a long time. It can take a long time. It is like any other litigation. It involves everything from gathering to opening statements to putting on your evidence to cross-examination to filing of motions, putting on closing arguments, etc. All when the licensee also has an attorney as well that is fighting this tooth and nail. So it's really the numbers, because one contested case can sideline an attorney for weeks, if not months, and that means it just backlogs, okay? It really does. Nevertheless, the team is committed, and they try their best, and they get really, really good results. You, members of the board and commission, you guys are the judges. It's a difficult situation to be into because you don't see the case. Okay? So unlike a judge that will have a case that's tried in front of them, you actually don't see it. By law, you have delegated that function to a hearings officer. So when the hearing officer hears the case, they end up writing a recommended order to you, and that is what you will see. You will also see a settlement agreement. Just like in a civil proceeding, the parties can agree to settle the case. It doesn't contain all of the facts. It just contains the critical consideration that went into the settlement agreement. And again, settlement agreements can unwind at any time, and it could lead to a trial. Therefore, what is presented to you as board members in a settlement agreement is just enough to give you an idea of what's going on, because if you reject it, it might have to go through the contested case process, and then you would see that case again. Okay, so I know and I understand and I acknowledge that I hear from board members that it's so difficult to make a decision on a settlement agreement because there's only manini facts, right? How are we supposed to do that? So in some ways, our office is asking for you to trust us and trust our judgment. Again, the attorneys are good. They work really hard. They consider an incredible amount of factors before deciding to resolve a case by settlement. And they also look at how similarly treated facts happened as well that result in those. So they compare it to other things as well in order to present a settlement to you. So you will see a settlement agreement, or you will see a hearings officer's recommended order in your capacity as board members when it comes to discipline. The things that I would like you to just remember when it comes to discipline is that the complaints do vary. So although you can put them in a similar universe, every single one is different. There are always facts unique to each particular complaint, and the attorneys do consider that. The second thing to remember is that there are a variety of disciplines that are available. The majority of disciplinary actions that you will see are monetary fines, but there are also cases in which, the more serious cases, in which RICO would be proposing to either suspend or revoke a person's license. There can also be situations where the licensee will be obligated to do something affirmative, such as maybe take an education course, or they may be subject to probation, and the board may end up monitoring certain terms to make sure that they comply. So really the universe of disciplines is pretty large. The attorneys work really hard to sometimes formulate that to the individual circumstances. I can tell you in all my years at RICO that it is rare that we run into what I say the evil licensee. Those are easy. We're going to go revoke your license. Most people kind of fall in the middle. You know, they make a mistake, or I didn't know, or they plead ignorance or whatever. So it's rare that we get evil. We get kind of a lot in the middle, and then kind of a lot like, oh my gosh, did I not do that? You know, sort of thing. So all of this, the disciplinary action that you will see will account for these variable factors that we see on a regular basis. The other thing I'd just like you to remember when you see disciplinary action in front of you is that it does not occur in a vacuum. Again, our office has to assure that our enforcement is clean, and that means that we have reliable evidence to count on in order to discipline someone. Regardless, and I have to admit, sometimes there are a lot of cases that we have where we're going to pursue enforcement action, and the respondents or licensees, you know, they're like, oh, well, whatever, I can pay the fine or whatever. Or they may not, or they may be out of town, or they may not appear, or what have you. Things are going on in their life and they don't appear. It's not a slam dunk for RICO. Okay, we still have to go through the hearings process. We still have to meet our burden of proof. And that's just the way it is, and that's just the law. Licensees are entitled to their due process. They worked hard. Each of you in this room know how hard you worked to get to where you are. They worked hard too. So they will fight tooth and nail in order to defend their livelihood and their reputations. Okay, so we make sure that we comply with the law. We make sure that due process is afforded. We make sure that whatever enforcement action we have, it will withstand scrutiny, especially on appeal. And believe me, they do appeal. And believe me, when they go through the appellate route, it takes years. It's like any other litigation, right? I mean, there's a couple of really young people in this audience, but I think most of us will remember that case from, quite a while ago that involved a pretty famous college football player who won the Heisman, went on to play professionally, became an actor, you know, was driving down on the freeway in the white Bronco, was arrested, was charged with some pretty serious criminal crimes. The trial took forever, was acquitted, then came all the civil proceedings and trying to enforce the judgment in the civil proceedings. That, and then all the other stuff that happened after it, the additional crimes and so forth, okay? Decades. And so I'm not saying RICO cases will take decades, but what I can say is they will not, believe me. But what I am saying is sometimes our cases can take a long period of time, and I know there is one right now that has bounced between the hearings office and the courts on appeal, and it just keeps bouncing back and forth. Okay, it is a hassle, but licensees have the right to due process, and they have the right to have an attorney vigorously represent them, and that's what they'll do. I'd like to just say a few things about how you, as board members, can assist RICO in the regulation of your various professions. The first thing I would like to say is that our greatest need from you and members of your industry is advisory committee members. An advisory committee member is like an expert in a lawsuit because you know your profession in and out, and you know it so much more than I ever will, or anyone in RICO ever will. We rely on your opinions when we have a case that is unique to your industry and we just can't decide what to do with it, or we need your expertise. They're called advisory committee members. They are appointed and they are immune from liability when they work for RICO and give us opinions. So one of the things that we always need is advisory committee members. We're in the process right now of renewing current advisory committee members, but there are a lot of people that are retiring, et cetera, so the numbers will go down. So I ask you to please consider being an advisory committee member. You actually can be an advisory committee member even though you are a member of a board. If the matter that you opined on ends up going through the contested case hearing process, then you would just simply recuse yourself from hearing that matter if it comes before you. But you actually can serve as an advisory committee member. Your identity is confidential. We do not let people know that you're working for us. I understand, small community, nobody wants to do it, but you know, we do. We basically protect your identity unless it's going to go to a contested case, in which case you're going to have to come up there and be a witness and give us the evidence that we need in order to prove the violation. If you know people in your industry that would be excellent advisory committee members, then please contact your executive officer, or you can call me at RICO, and we will get in touch with that person, because that is our greatest need. The other thing that you could help us in regulating your profession is in the area of education. And what I mean by that is just talk to people in your industry. Tell them that it's important to comply with the licensing laws. Tell them, do you know what the licensing laws are? And if you don't, this is RICO's website. Here's some brochure, read it. You know, you are a representative of your industry, and you hold a lot of power. So whenever you see them, talk to them. Several years ago, I had an acquaintance who was a member of the board, and whenever I saw this person, I remarked that I never really see any complaints from your particular industry. Why is that? And the person basically said that they self-regulate. They know before we ever will what's going on in the community. And so when they hear something is happening by a particular professional in their community, they're like on it, and they're there. And they're there to provide support, and they're there to provide guidance, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the reason why we didn't see a whole lot of complaints in that particular area. You guys hold that ability as well. So I would strongly suggest that you guys just get out there, network in your various industries, and tell them that it is important to know the licensing laws and to comply. The final thing that you can do to sort of assist in the regulation of your industry is be the best that you can be. You know, and by that I mean know the licensing laws in your area and comply with them. We have a lot of cases every single year. People call them technical violations, but they are nevertheless violations of professionals who don't renew their licenses on time, or they're not updating their addresses in a timely manner, or they haven't taken their CE courses, just technical things like that. Okay, we can and do take disciplinary action in those cases, but you as board members, you should be above that. So know when your deadlines are, and please comply with them, and tell everybody in your office and in your industry to do so. As a board member, you are up there on your profession, but you may also have a target on your back. They're just people are people. People may be jealous. People may be spiteful, what have you. So you need to be above board, know the licensing laws, and comply with them. It's just like being the subject matter of a lawsuit or the subject matter of a complaint. It is very, very stressful. Even though there may be no wrongdoing and no fault on your part, it is very, very stressful just to go through the process. So try to avoid that. Be in compliance. And I do have to tell you that as a board member, if a complaint is filed against you, you will not get any special treatment from RICO. You will be handled accordingly like any other licensee. So be the best that you can be. And as a matter of fact, that's why you guys are here in this room, because you guys are at the top of your profession. You do have standing, and use it for the benefit of your industry. And the other thing I'd like to say is, yes, last fiscal year, RICO imposed about a little over 400 legal actions. Okay, so the funnel, right? 2698 just for fiscal 2018, 2698 down to 400 legal actions. So a lot of the cases are disposed of here in the middle. 400 legal actions is substantial, but that's nothing compared to the 166,000 plus licensees that are out there. In other words, I think we need to tell people that people in the professions are doing good. You know, they're serving the public the way they are supposed to, you know, and that's a good thing. 400 from 2,600, you know, you guys are doing a good job. So I want to thank you guys for that. I thank you for your service. I look forward to working with you guys in the future. Thank you.
Board members, I'd like to introduce Senator Roz Baker. She is the chair of the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection and Health. And you will, if you are interim members, will have to come before her committee to be actually confirmed by the Senate. Okay, so for some of you who are interim members, Senator Baker is someone that you will soon meet.
Oh, that sounds so scary.
No, not that.
Aloha and good morning. I thought that I would give you a little bit of a taste of what may be coming if you have not come before the committee to be vetted before the Senate confirms you. So first of all, mahalo for all of your willingness to serve and for your service as a board member. Our board and commission members serve an important function. You really assist in the functioning of our licensing laws. And without you, we have both licensee and public members as part of each of the boards. We wouldn't really be able to function to make sure that the licensing laws are upheld and that our professions are treated appropriately. You are all governors' appointees, and the Senate has the sole responsibility for confirming governor's nominees from the Supreme Court all the way to all of our boards and commissions. We treat governor's messages like a bill. That means it gets referred to committee, we hold public hearings, we write a committee report. It's the committee report that takes it to the floor of the full Senate, and then we take a vote on advise and consent or to confirm nominees. Most all of the boards and commissions that are under the DCCA come to my committee because my committee jurisdiction is commerce, consumer protection, and health, which means I have the committee that I chair has the jurisdiction over items in DCCA as well as in the Department of Health. So if you have not been before the Senate to have your nomination confirmed, this is what you might expect. My committee will ask the nominees a few questions. And all of their answers will be shared with the other members of the committee. I personally contact each board member to make sure that they're interested in serving and to explain the process. I also want each nominee to not have to contact all of the members of my committee. So I can vouch for all of the nominees with my committee members, and I can say that I have a really pretty good track record. I don't know that anybody has been turned down if the chair of the committee has recommended advise and consent. Prior to contacting each of the nominees, we'll schedule a date for the hearing. My committee room is 229 on the second floor of the Capitol and the Eva Malka wing of the Capitol, so right upstairs. Unfortunately, we want everybody to attend the hearing, but because it's set on my committee's agenda and my committee's schedule, sometimes people cannot attend, and that's okay. We'll ask you to do what we ask all of the ones that will be in attendance, that is to give us at least 3 letters of support from friends, family, colleagues to say, you know, this person is a really good person, knows the profession, will be a great board member. Whatever they want to say positive about you. Because we want that supportive testimony because we want your tenure as board members to be successful. We use that testimony when we write a committee report. As I said, we treat governor's messages like a bill. So we have to have testimony on the item, the nomination. My staff will take that testimony, write up a committee report. The committee report goes to the full Senate, and that's really how the rest of the committee, the rest of the senators have a contact with you and know who they're voting on and why we've recommended. So each one of the nominees in that particular committee report have a little synopsis of what your background is, what your qualifications are, and why the committee recommended to advise and consent. Once they come to the floor, the full Senate votes. The recommendation is to advise and consent. Once we pass the vote on the Senate, you are officially confirmed, and governor or somebody from the executive branch will swear you in. It's an open process, so we let everybody know when your nomination is going to come to the floor of the Senate for a vote, and we welcome you to be in the gallery that day with any friends or family that you want to have. I know the process can sometimes be a little bit intimidating, and we certainly don't want it to be. I try to be as friendly as I can be when I'm talking to you on the phone, explain any questions that you have. And my committee is really very grateful for your willingness to take the time and effort to be part of the boards and commissions system, because without you, our licensing laws and some of the other functions that we have in government would not work as well as intended. So that's part of how we engage professionals as well as members of the public in that process. If you ever have any questions as you're preparing for your confirmation hearing, don't ever hesitate to call my office. I have a staff dedicated to working on the boards and commissions. And of course, if I happen to be in the office when you call, I'll be more than happy to speak with you or get back to you. Also, can communicate with email whenever you have an issue or concern, and maybe it's just easier to shoot off an email in the middle of the night rather than disrupt your workday by trying to get a hold of me. I would be happy to answer any questions that any of you might have, either now or afterward. But again, thank you very much for your willingness to serve. Thank you for making yourselves available to be part of this process, because it really will help to advance your various professions. Mahalo.
How's it? What do you call? I'd just like to echo what the senator said and express my gratitude and appreciation for all of you serving, and particularly after hearing from RICO, I'm still amazed you still want to serve, actually. Oh my goodness. She put the fear in you. Come on, as Esther said, that side of the shop is very few and far between, and again, it goes to show you how the industries really, in many respects, self-regulate themselves. But let me just say this. As Senator said, she confirms all of your nominations that's sent down by the governor. The House is not that part of it, but of course, we hear all the bills that impact on your industry. And I've been chairing the Consumer Protection Committee for the past 2.5 years, and prior to that, I chaired the Education Committee for 15 years. And I can give you an education example. 30, 40 years ago, when there was an opening for principals, maybe 20 or 30 people would apply for it. Today, if there's an opening for a principal, there are times when no one applies for it. And it goes to show you that there's not that many people willing to step up and get into a leadership position. And it's for a wide number of reasons, but all of you, decided that you would take on a leadership position, and actually you're not getting paid to do it too. You're doing it as a volunteer basis because you want to give back to the community, and you should be commended for that. So the bills that we hear both in the House and the Senate, I know, Senator, I can speak for the Senator on this, we really depend and rely upon your expertise. When there's a bill that impacting on beauticians or elevator mechanics or electricians or whatever the industry might be, your voice and your perspective is very important. Now, we hear from a lot of stakeholders, and not everybody at times agree with each other, but your voice, and because you're speaking from your board or commission perspective, it means that the position was vetted, it was discussed at the meeting, and so whatever decision you come up with is a reflection of a consensus as opposed to an individual coming with a personal opinion. So don't think your voice doesn't count, because it really does. And once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know it's really a labor of love, and I hope to see some of you at the hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. That concludes our orientation, and I do want to thank you for your willingness to serve. It is difficult. I think I heard someone from the governor's staff today indicate that there's about 127 vacancies. So like Esther is looking for ACM or advisory committee members, we are also looking for board members. So if you can reach out to your colleagues and tell them that it's really not that bad a job, that for them to, file applications with the governor's office, and then so that we can vet them and have them participate in this government process. We're also looking for public members. So say you are done with your tenure as a licensee on a particular board, you could always come and be a public member on another board. So, we are actively trying to recruit public members. So if any of you are interested, or if you know of people who may be interested, please reach out to them. You can let us know, or the executive officers know, and we can then forward that governor's application that's online now to them. So, on behalf of DCCA, PVL, we want to thank you for your, attendance today, and also for your, willingness to serve the public. Thank you.